we will find out about what's going on down at Blackwell, and particularly with Naomi Gariff. We're going to hear from Naomi, who is the curator for Lakeland Arts based at Blackwell, who has won an award, excitingly, and we're going to see some pictures of bits and bobs as well. And then we're also going to hear from Amanda Drago, in Gilsland, just on the border there with Northumberland, at Croft Arts, who has got a fascinating project coming up, looking for some support and some artists to get involved, about Delia Derbyshire, who I guess, so I work for the BBC, so I guess she was a colleague of mine before I joined the BBC, because she was one of the brains behind the Doctor Who theme tune, which you'll all be familiar with. And I've actually managed to dig out a bit of film of her talking about it as well, so we'll have a look at that too. So interesting stuff this morning, but first of all, let's cross to Naomi, who is, as I said, a curator for Lakeland Arts, works at Blackwell, been there for a few years, and is an award-winning curator. So Naomi, I'm going to let you tell us your story, and Amy will pull up your slides when you're ready to go, and we'll listen to what you've got to say. So over to you.
Hi, so yeah, I'm Naomi Gariff. I'm the programme curator at Lakeland Arts. I work across a number of sites. I work across kind of Abbott Hall, Windermere Jetty, but I'm predominantly based at Blackwell, the Arts and Crafts House. And it's in that role that I was recently awarded the Art Fund's inaugural Sir Nicholas Goodison Award, which is very exciting. So I've just put together some slides, a little PowerPoint presentation, some very pretty pictures of Blackwell. It's like mandatory. Can we all see that? Yeah.
Yeah, we can all see that.
Okay, I'll just get my notes up. So the award was set up in last year in memory of the late Sir Nicholas Goodison, who was an avid collector of contemporary craft and a very generous benefactor to many museums and galleries. He gifted a lot of works to organisations over the years, and he was a very strong advocate for museums collecting craft, which is maybe not always as widely collected sometimes as fine art. So the purpose of the award is to support an early to mid-career curator in developing a contemporary craft collection through a very generous grant of £60,000. It was a national award, so it was open to museums and galleries across the UK, and there was some really stiff competitions from quite heavy hitters, so people like the V&A. So I wasn't really sure how far we would get. But I really believe in Blackwell. I believe in its potential, and I always think you have to back yourself. So I threw my hat into the ring, and amazingly, we won the full award of £60,000. So I'm excited to share with you today the project that the award will fund and kind of what that means for Blackwell and our collection. Let's go to the next slide, please. So I'll start just by giving an overview of Blackwell for anyone who hasn't yet visited us. And so Blackwell is a historic arts and crafts house. It's based just outside Bowness, and it was completed in 1901. It was designed by the noted arts and craft architect Hugh Bailey Scott, and the house incorporates a lot of local vernacular into kind of its typical arts and crafts style. So it's got rounded chimney pots, the rough cast white render, and it includes a lot of Westmoreland green slate, kind of local stone within the actual building itself. And next slide, please. So Blackwell is considered to be one of the most exceptional examples of arts and crafts architecture in Britain. And that's because many of its original internal features still exist, which is quite rare for a lot of arts and crafts houses. So like during the kind of mid-20th century, when mid-century modern kind of design was becoming very fashionable, a lot of arts and crafts interiors like this were seen as kind of Victorian, like dowdy relics, and a lot of the interiors were stripped out. And so the fact that Blackwell has retained so many of these internal features is what makes the building really special. It provides this kind of snapshot into what kind of a perfect arts and crafts house would be. And so if you haven't visited it already, I would highly recommend it. It's a very beautiful house. Next slide, please. So as well as the building itself, Blackwell is home to an amazing collection of arts and crafts objects, and that's ranging from furniture to textiles, metalware and ceramics. And this includes works by both nationally renowned designers, so people such as William Morris and Voisey, Bailey Scott, so the secretaire on the left there is by Bailey Scott, but also local makers, so who are associated with the Lake District arts and crafts movement, so people like Annie Garnett, who ran the spinnery in Windermere, and John Postlethwaite Barker, who was a furniture maker based in Broughton-in-Furness and made the intricately carved sideboard there on the right. Next slide, please. So as the history of the arts and crafts movement is obviously really central to Blackwell, contemporary craft has also played a really important role in its development as a gallery. So since opening in 2001, Blackwell has nurtured and commissioned the work of both established and emerging contemporary craftspeople, including Edmund Duval, Magdalena Redondo, Rosie Galloway-Smith, on this call, Halima Cassell, whose second exhibition at Blackwell Reflections is currently on display, and Laura Ellen Bacon photographed here in 2012, making a giant wicker sculpture that wraps itself around the exterior of the building. But as a small charity-run gallery, Blackwell has rarely been in a position to acquire any, the contemporary craft that is commissioned. And the current contemporary craft collection that we have has relied really heavily on the generosity of makers that we've worked with, donating to the collection, and also on loans from private collections, which currently make up 84% of that collection. So it's a really kind of high amount. And that means that the future of that collection is really uncertain. Next slide, please. Not having the means to acquire works has also meant that we've missed out on some really amazing pieces over the years. So this is just one example. This is a settle from the Ruslan movement, who are a collective based in Backbarrow, sort of inspired by kind of arts and crafts ethos. And its design takes reference from the finials in Blackwell's white drawing room. So, it's a piece that's created for an exhibition created, for Blackwell, and, we weren't in a position to acquire it, which is really unfortunate. Next slide, please. So this is where the award comes in, which is very exciting. So I put forward our case to the Art Fund, and I said that, it's such a shame that we're missing out on all these amazing pieces, and, we're doing a lot of work to support contemporary makers, and there's not a legacy to that. And they were really receptive to our plight, and they acknowledged that Blackwell is, a really special place with a unique collection that deserves to be invested in. And the award will help us to do that. So with the support of the award funding, I'll be able to embark on an exciting collection project that will transition us away from this sort of historic and quite passive approach to collecting contemporary craft into a more active and research-led approach, which will ensure the growth and enrichment of the collection, and to make sure that growth happens in a really considered and authentic way. The project will feed into a wider curatorial vision that I have for Blackwell, which is to explore the principles of the arts and crafts movement through a more contemporary and radical lens, upending kind of perceived notions about what the arts and crafts movement was. So yes, it was about these really beautiful aesthetics that, and that is kind of what a lot of people take away from Blackwell. Isn't the arts and crafts movement beautiful? But underpinning this aesthetic was a really deep concern for the social and environmental impact of making. In the kind of current context, the global climate crisis, the cost of living crisis, those ethics around what we make, the conditions under which people make them, and the impact this all has on the planet is as important now as it was in the time of William Morris, and it's arguably more so now. And so I believe that Blackwell and its collection, as the kind of physical embodiment of these concerns, provides a really unique and fertile ground upon which to explore those ethics and the important role that sustainable materials and sustainable practices will have on our global collective future. Next slide, please. It's for this reason that the project will primarily be focusing on researching and acquiring pieces from makers whose practice reflects and aligns with that ethos of the arts and crafts movement. So it'll be makers who are working in environmentally conscious ways, embracing natural materials, championing the continuation of heritage craft skills, and really importantly are kind of driven by that underlying, those underlying ethical principles. So just a few examples of people that I've been looking into and researching. So makers such as Delia James. Delia James is based in Walthamstow, which is actually the birthplace of William Morris. And her studio is just a stone's throw away from his childhood home. She makes textiles, and she's really inspired by kind of Morris's approach to traditional textile making. So She hand dyes and hand weaves her textiles, and through her practice, she is exploring ways in which the textile industry can become more sustainable. So in the era of fast fashion, the textile industry is one of the kind of biggest contributors to climate change. It's a huge contributor to landfill. And so what James is doing is she's experimenting with innovative natural fibers that are often the products of agriculture, sort of byproducts of agricultural industry. So for instance, making fibers from dried banana leaves, that otherwise would have just been thrown away. Next slide, please. This is Jade Ford. So Ford is a glassmaker. He's originally from Bermuda, but he now works in the UK. And his practice combines kind of heritage craft skills with digital technologies, exploring how technology can be used to support and advance handmaking practices rather than just simply replacing them. So this vase is from his Breathe series, and it was made using, I'm going to try to explain this, I'm not like great at explaining it, but so it's creating a digitally created mold. So basically it's designed around a sound wave of him blowing. So the actual shape of the vase is a sound wave of him blowing kind of, and it's I think it's really interesting. So this idea of kind of using high-tech, this new high-tech technology, but then combining it with kind of age-old practices of glassmaking to create this beautiful contemporary piece. So next slide, please. And finally, this is someone you may recognise. This is Paul Scott. So Paul is a Cumbria-based artist, and he works and responds to the history of mass-produced transferware in a critique of the social and environmental impacts of industry. And while Scott's works may not sort of initially seem to align with the arts and crafts ethos because they are themselves kind of mass-produced objects, it's more his approach to his practice that really resonates. And so he's reusing and appropriating existing ceramics. So a lot of his practice is is really sustainable. There's not a lot of wastage in it. He's not producing a lot of new output. And also his works are really kind of drilling into the environmental and human cost of industry. So they definitely kind of resonate in that way. But yeah, that's just a few examples of people that I've been looking into and researching. We're hoping to collect a minimum of 6 objects with the funding, and hopefully there'll be a legacy to that as well. Because in the past, when we've tried to get funding to acquire contemporary craft, we've kind of always been told, oh, you're an arts and crafts kind of house, you're a historic house, like, why would you want to kind of collect contemporary craft? But this award will hopefully change that and change the way that we're viewed. And the hope is that kind of in the future, we can become this kind of place for, a centre of excellence really in contemporary, in craft, sort of all craft, whether that's historic or contemporary. And so yeah, so that's the project. And if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. Great, thank you, Naomi. If you want to, let's go back to the group. Always great to see some visuals of Blackwell. It's a beautiful place. Just come on, Andrew's got a really interesting point in chat, which I might ask him to elaborate on in a second. But just a couple of questions from me first of all, Naomi. So just 60,000 quid. Congratulations. Do you get any of that, or does it all go on the project? Well, so the way that the funding is structured. So 10% of that funding goes on to research. So that's for me to kind of so I should say it's a 2-year project. So the first year is kind of research. And that 10% is kind of the £6,000 is funding kind of research trips, so spending a whole year basically going kind of sort of everywhere, kind of speaking to people. That'll be speaking to makers, to galleries. Because one of the things I'm really interested in finding out about is actually collecting, because we don't collect a lot of contemporary things, like actively, buying things. It's quite a rare thing to be able to do. So it's researching that, and then also kind of finding out about makers, because I'm sure that there are, probably thousands of people kind of that would apply to that criteria. So it's sort of trying drilling that down, and then £54,000 is solely for purchasing, which is like a huge amount of money. Yeah, well, but it's a great. It must feel liberating that you've now got potential to spend proper time touching on the research that you've just mentioned there, and B, the potential to actually purchase some stuff which can actually belong and not be unknown, as you say, at Blackwell. It must be a great feeling. And do you think, do you think that
let's say in 2 years' time, if I was to visit Blackwell, what might be different as a result of this award?
It's hopefully to kind of not have as much of maybe say like disparity between when we do contemporary programming sort of in the historic house, is sort of looking back over sort of Andrew's comment there, we do get kind of a lot of well, not a lot, I'd say there's a percentage of people who are sort of, why are you doing this? And sort of don't really understand it and don't really see how it relates. But and sort of this kind of what I was saying about this sort of perceived views about what the arts and crafts movement was, and that people kind of look on the arts and crafts movement and say it was a really backwards looking movement because it sort of look into the past to sort of, you know, re-establish guilds and things like that. But in reality, it was quite radical, and a lot of the kind of the sort of things that people believed in the arts and crafts movement are still what people believe in today. You know, the idea of sort of being made, not bought, like caring about the environment, caring about, you know, the workers and people who are making things. It's incredibly like relevant. So hopefully it'll kind of help us to explore those elements of the arts and crafts movement and show how they're actually really relevant. And so, because I'm always trying to kind of make people realize that the arts and crafts movement isn't just sort of flowery wallpaper. There's so much more to it than that. So hopefully it'll sort of help us do that, help us tell that historic story through contemporary work.
Right. So again, in 2 years' time, I might see some different storytelling, some more evolved interpretation, maybe 2 or 3 objects that you've managed to buy that you wouldn't have been able to exhibit without the award.
Yeah, and also sort of working with community groups, working with schools, to look at particularly sort of climate change and things like that, and sort of saying, looking at sort of what the future of making is, and how we can make things that are more sustainable. And yeah, so it's sort of building this collection that will help us kind of not just sort of look at the past, but then also look to the future as well. Yeah,
because the resonance to the present day is interesting. Some of these nice comments. I don't know if you've seen Naomi. Lorna saying what a great project, and Kate agreeing there. Rosie saying really excited to see how it develops, and Amanda saying what a great opportunity to spend time on investing in your own practice as a curator as well. That must be, and I think you found out you got the award a few months ago now. It must also be a sort of you know, a feather in your cap of self-confidence about, you know, you can obviously tell a story, write an application form, and people are prepared to invest in you. That must be a great feeling.
Yeah, it was my first ever like grant application that I had done. Yeah, it's definitely a kind of boosting my confidence. And yeah, I think it's going to be a really great opportunity in terms of sort of development of my practice, sort of learning best practice from other places. It's going to be a really great opportunity, even just for finding, you know, you don't often get that time to sort of research things and go out there and, you know, and find people, find makers to work with. So it's going to have a really sort of positive impact on me, but I'm hoping also to on Blackwell and wider Lakeland Arts in terms of making connections, because sort of connections are so important to the work that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Andrew, do you want to elaborate a little bit more on your comment and your observation?
I could do, yeah. No, I mean, fantastic. You've got that award, Naomi. Blackwell's one of the great places in the world. And every chance I can get to go there, I go. Often just to look at the doorknobs and window fittings, which are the most fantastic things. Anyway, a few years ago, I went, I can't remember whose exhibition it was, but there's an exhibition there, and I read through I was writing in the visitor's book, and I read the comments and was astonished at the vitriol that was expressed there. And I've come across that quite a few times in relation to this, you know, the notion of what we've got about many people have about the Lake District and the reality of the Lake District. And I said in my comments about the recent issues over the Windermere cruises not mentioning the slave trade in their narrations. And you've sort of answered the question, Naomi, but there's this tension between wanting to give people a rich experience of the meanings of the places that they come to visit, which are often contradictory to making those places feel welcoming to people. So I think this is a big tension in the tourism industry, that, yeah, there are these tensions between the reality and what people think they want or what people really want. They maybe just want to escape for a weekend from their busy lives. But you've answered the question in the sense that I think you've come across this sort of friction between what people want Blackwell to be and what it actually is. And I'll just tell you one thing. I came across Ruskin. I grew up in the industrial Northwest, and I first came across Ruskin through his political thinking and through a gallery in Sheffield. And if you came across Ruskin through that route, it's very different to the idea of Ruskin up in the Lake District. So I think it depends on where you're coming from as to whether you think, and this includes the Lake poets, all the romanticists, they were as radical as they come, but we tend to sanitize that because it's maybe an easier sell, but more power to your elbow, Naomi. It's fantastic that you've got the funding to do that work, and I look forward to visiting again.
Thank you.
Do you want to, Verity asks, Naomi, thank you, Andrew, by the way. Verity asks, is there anywhere we can follow any of your ongoing research? She loves all things Victorian radicals. And Amy asks, will there be a Cumbrian link or strand to some of the new craft acquisitions? Two questions.
Yeah, so I'm hoping to kind of set up a blog and sort of do posts about kind of updates on the research, which so hopefully be on the Lakeland Arts website. And yeah, definitely sort of one of the strands, the criteria I'll be looking at is Cumbrian makers, because I said there's sort of this there is a part of the sort of historic collection that is kind of looking at the arts and crafts movement in the Lake District, and so it definitely made sense for us to look at contemporary making in Cumbria. So like I said, the Paul was an example of that, and so if there's anyone that you think would kind of fit within that criteria of being kind of somebody who is contemporary making, who is sort of working in even like traditional craft skills, like using natural materials, but is very much like driven by kind of ethical principles, I'm very open to kind of any suggestions. Yeah, it's sort of I've got a whole year to research, and so I'm trying to just find out as much as I can, really.
There's a campaign for Lorna Singleton building in chat. Lorna's on this call. I don't know whether she's going to come off mute, but Lorna is a great. Do you know Lorna at all, Naomi?
No, I've heard of her, but I don't know.
Brilliant spelt basket maker in Grisdale, not a million miles away from you. And I think Lorna and Naomi should talk to each other. Really good example, and I'm sure there are other examples as well. So anyway, thank you very much indeed, Naomi. Please, maybe in 6 months' time or so, you might want to come back again and let us know how your zigzagging of the country and meeting interesting people is going, and you can just bring us up to date. So that'd be fantastic to hear your story. Lorna's saying she's using the excuse the internet is too rubbish today to unmute, but I hope you get a chance to talk to each other as a result of this call. Well done, Naomi. I think part of what we should do in this group is to champion and congratulate people that are successful in whatever way that might be. And congratulations on winning that award. It sounds like you should do a masterclass on how to fill out application forms as well. If that was your first one, we could all benefit from that. But well done, and lovely to see you. Thank you for talking to us this morning. Do stick around though, because we are now going to cross to the north of the county to Gilsland, which if you go to Gilsland, there's a road that goes through Gilsland, which is half in Northumberland and half in Cumbria. Amanda, are you on the Cumbrian side of the border?
No, we're on the Northumbrian side of the border, but we do work with the Cumbria folk on the other side. So a lot of our sprawling village is kind of in Cumbria as well. So,
yeah, no, it's a lovely part of the world, really, really special part of the world.
Straddle the border.
And Amanda, amongst many other things, manages to create amazing projects, and sometimes, I'm sure not always, manages to get some money to help fund them as well. And this is a really good example that is coming up around the corner about a woman called Delia Derbyshire. So Amanda, if you want to just perhaps introduce the topic and what you're doing, I've got a little film that I can play whenever Amy will drop it in and play it, and we can watch that. It's about 5 minutes long, and then we can pick up as to your ask as well. So over to you, Amanda.
Thank you. So we live on Hadrian's Wall, and a lot of the history and heritage of what we do is centred on Hadrian's Wall, and sometimes that can dominate what we do. So we were looking quite more broadly about what else was going on in our area, and we discovered that actually there were some different people who actually lived in our area, and we could pull off, because I like to pull off different things and create projects around things that have meaning for me. And so Delia Derbyshire was a female electronic musician. She worked for the BBC Radiophonic Workshop during the 50s and 60s, early 70s. And her most well-known piece of music was arranging the Doctor Who theme tune, which was composed by Ron Granier, but she actually did the arrangement. Now, when she was working at the BBC Radiophonic Workshop, they worked under the name of the BBC Radiophonic Workshop, as opposed to people being given credit for what their work was. So she was never credited for the Doctor Who theme tune music until after her death. And so that's quite, and I think she worked quite hard in the BBC Radiophonic Workshop. Anyway, she was doing some amazing work in terms of analog electronic music. So what I mean by analog as opposed to digital is that she would make some found sounds, record those found sounds, cut and splice reel to reel, and then re-record that. So she was working, every sound that she made as part of her compositions were found sounds that she recorded, then spliced together, cut and paste, looped. So all of those things that you now know in electronic music, she was doing on a reel-to-reel and kind of an analog way. But she really set the tone for electronic music. But what she did with the analog aspect is that her music sounds really organic, as opposed to kind of piecing together blocks of music that can sometimes feel like electronic music. So actually her music's quite organic, I would probably say, but it took a long time to make. So you can imagine the time and the energy that she put into making that music. After she left the BBC, she actually moved to Gilsland, and she lived in our village for about 7-8 years. During that time, she did make some music, but she kind of dropped out a little bit, and that might be to do with her mental health. But she did actually make music when she was here. So what we're doing is exploring her relationship with Gilsland and her music making. So we're commissioning different artists to create new music inspired by Delia. She absolutely, it was a laborious process, that. So every note was considered, every note was absolutely really thought about. And you know how electronic music can be played now, we can do it on our phone and it's really easy. But actually she was kind of like I would say the grandmother of electronic music, also DJing. You can see how actually some of those things link into kind of DJ and bring things in and out, and fascinating clip, and I really love it. So what we're doing is we're partnering with different organisations. We've got some money from Arts Council, and we've also got some money from Fell Foot Forward, and we've got different partners on board in order to be able to fund some commissions. So we are working with Northumberland National Park, we're working with RSPB Geltsdale, and we're also working with North Pennines Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty, and Arts Council England as a main funder. When she moved here, she actually worked at the quarry just outside of RSPB Geltsdale in Holbank Gate. She was a radio operator for Laings Engineering, and they were laying a gas pipe, and the gas pipe actually goes through RSPB Geltsdale, so it's actually that ridge, as you can see. So what we're trying to do is connect with places where she lived or worked, and place the commissions within the areas that she had some connection to. She also worked with Li Wanxi, which had a studio on Banks, so she was in part of the gallery there. So Li Wanxi was a Chinese sculptor, visual artist who had a gallery on Hadrian's Wall, and he commissioned massive amounts of art. If you look at his archive, it's an amazing archive. And we're also working with the Delia Derbyshire Day organisation, who the chair of the organisation is Dr. David Butler, and he manages Delia's archive. He also manages Li Wanxi's archive as well. And so what we're doing is we're commissioning different people to make new music inspired by Delia's time in here, or to do with dark sounds or found sounds. So the commissions are going to be presented in November when it's Dark Skies Festival. So that's why we're connecting with Northumberland National Park. So it's going to be part of their Dark Skies Festival. And also North Pennines Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty, RSPB Geltsdale is one of their Dark Skies venues. They're going to be presented in November, which is the 23rd of November is Delia Derbyshire Day. That's also the anniversary this year of the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who's first transmission on TV. So we're kind of lining those dates up. So the commissions, Kit Haig, who's my partner at Croft Arts, he's a musician, composer and sound artist. He's working with a visual artist and a theatre designer called Imogen Chloe, and they're going to create Delia's desk, but a version of Delia's desk. So it's going to be an interactive desk where you can, we're going to use engagement projects, creating new found sounds from the area. We're going to manipulate those sounds, and then they're going to go into the desk, and people can manipulate these sounds to create new music, which they can then, there's a visual output, and there'll be a sound output as well. And also Imogen Chloe, who's a theatre set designer, she's going to kind of create a kind of like it'll feel like a kind of industrial BBC radiophonic desk, if that makes sense. So that's great. Then we've got one open commission for a female artist, a mid-career artist, and that's £3,000 commission. And it can be anything to do with electronic music, electronic sound, moving image. It could be something kinesthetic, it could be digital visual art. A lot of the work that she did outside of the BBC Radiophonic Orchestra was a collaboration with moving image artists. So when she was here, she collaborated with a couple of Dutch artists, Madeleine Hoykas and Elsa Stansfield, to create 2 new moving image pieces, which we've got permission to play as part of our our exhibition. And so we're not defining, it doesn't have to be sound, it could be something to do with that it could be web-based art, could be multimedia media, it could be interactive media, something in that kind of barrier of new music, new sound, new visuals. And then we've got some smaller commissions, which we haven't advertised just yet. They're micro commissions, and they're for emerging artists. Now, what we want to do with those is not advertise them through existing artistic networks, but we're working with some people to try and advertise them through youth clubs, or where young people might not think that music or visual arts is their thing, if that makes sense. So they're going to be some smaller commissions, but we're working with some key partners to be able to do that. The commissions are going to be presented at the Sill for a live event. There's going to be a weekend of workshops at the Sill with different artists. The artists have access to Delia's archive, so they're going to be going to Manchester where the archive is, and then they're going to go, all of the commissions are going to go to RSPB Geltsdale and be there from November through to December.
Amanda, what a terrific, comprehensive, fascinating, multifaceted, reaching out in the right areas project this is. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. Andrew's shared a really interesting link that I will listen to after this call as well, which looks like a really interesting piece of work about Delia.
Yes, so Delia Derbyshire Day organisation, which is the link there, they're one of our partners, so they're going to be coming and bringing some of their existing work to our exhibition as well, so brilliant. Great.
And also I noticed that Amy a little bit earlier shared the link to the whole project on your website, Amanda.
Thank you.
So if people want more details or want to share this beyond, then please feel free to do so. Andrew, did you want to say something?
Oh, yeah, just about that, the piece I linked. You sort of hinted at this, Amanda, in your introduction around some of the health and mental health issues that Delia faced in her life, and the piece that we commissioned from Jen is a radio piece, and she got first witness testimonies from people who knew her while she was up here, and some of the things that crop up in that are, like, again, you hinted at this, rather dark, and then that caused a little bit of fuss. So I wouldn't advise anyone to take that documentary as a the only side of Delia. I mean, she was, you know this, she was an absolutely fascinating character. Two things about her that, I mean, there was a time not that long ago when no one had heard about her. She sounds really posh in that film, but she came from Coventry, and her mum sent her to elocution lessons, which tells its own story in many ways. The other thing about her was she was brilliant at maths, and those of you that know me will know that I've got this slight obsession with STEAM rather than STEM, and she's a perfect example of that. The last thing is that the foundations of the radiophonic workshop, there were a couple of men involved, but it was mostly women. And it's still a story that isn't being told. One last thing, the BBC Radiophonic Workshop, all of the major radio stations in Europe and America had electronic music studios, which were used to make serious electronic music. The BBC couldn't quite bring themselves to do that. So basically the Radiophonic Workshop was the sound effects department for BBC drama. And it was through the brilliance of those women that they managed to produce this other work alongside that. And they had to beg, borrow and steal equipment for a long time, which is a noble tradition. But there's still big stories around that. And I'm glad, Amanda, you've dug, you've connected with that. She was one reason I moved to Cumbria, because I knew Hugh Davis told me the story a long time ago that she'd moved to Cumbria, and I didn't believe it. And then finally found out all the bits and pieces. So yeah, because it's interesting why Cumbria seems to be home to people who are escaping from somewhere. But that's another project.
Andrew, I was just going to say, we are doing a podcast and we're interviewing Dr. David Butler, who manages the archive, and we're going to talk about a little bit about why she escaped, but not touch on the mental health issues or
yeah. I mean, it's a difficult thing to sort of work around, but that I just wanted to warn people about that piece by Jen, in that it's a bit warts and all, but it is fascinating. And I think I'm right in saying that David comes from Cumbria.
Yes, he does, and he's really passionate about the project as well. So yeah.
All right. Lovely stuff. Andrew, thank you for that background. That's really interesting, and for putting that link there. And lovely anecdote from you, Phil, as well. I love a reel-to-reel machine. In my early days, I was cutting, splicing, yellow tape, red and white, leader tape, all that sort of stuff. It's great to use your hands to make sound. Fascinating stuff, Amanda. Good luck with that. And you know, when it all comes to fruition, it'd be lovely to revisit this and see what you're doing. So well done and good luck. I hope you get the right people in the right way. Thank you. Right, we're just going to finish off the last 5 minutes. Kate, who is the chair of Parry, who's the chair of the Cumbria Arts and Culture Network, just to bring us up to speed on one or two things going on and where we're at with the network. So Kate, over to you for 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. It does feel a bit the story of my life that I get the boring bit at the end. All the sort of boring figures and stats. It's difficult to follow those two such interesting projects. Thank you to both, Amanda and Naomi for talking to us about those things. Just before I talk about CACN, I just want to back up really what Andrew was saying earlier about Blackwell being one of the most special places in the world. My mum, shortly before she died, actually went to Blackwell. I took her for her birthday, and she said that Blackwell was second only to the Taj Mahal in its beauty, which is saying something really. It was February and a beautiful snowy day, and it really sticks in my mind. So if you've never been to Blackwell, you really must go. The other place there you must also go that I wanted to give a special mention to this morning is Wordsworth Grasmere, another one of the museums that I work with in my day job. They've just won Best Small Attraction for the Cumbria Tourism Awards this year for 2023. And they are an amazing place. If you've never been to Wordsworth Grasmere, also go there, because the newly transformed Dove Cottage and the new museum is really, really worth a trip, hence their award. So I wanted to give a shout out for the team. And look out for their amazing picture of them all on the top deck of the 599 from Kendal to Grasmere. It's a brilliant picture doing the rounds on social media today of them celebrating footballer style. So yeah, CACN, this is what I do with my kind of outside of my CMC job. At this point in the year, we are 18 months through a Sellafield NDA funded project, which means that as a network, we have to report in the usual way to our funders. So having just finished that report, it just felt like a kind of moment to give you a few sort of figures about what the network's been up to and say what we've been doing. So we received £25,000 a year from the NDA, who help us deliver our sort of core programme, essentially. In addition to that, we have £10,000 from what was the County Council each year. And this year, in the last 6 months, we've also received £2,200 from the Arts Fundraising and Philanthropy, which is what largely funded our fundraising training workshops that some of you will have attended back in May. And actually this year, we've actually earned some money. We've earned nearly £1,000 through supporting other people's events, such as the Deep Time artist talks that we've been running over the last few months. So that's all grist to the mill in terms of sustaining what we do. Just a few highlights then from this report. I wouldn't dream of reading all of it because it's terribly tedious, but a few of the really good things that we've been doing in the last 6 months. Our mentoring scheme has been running for the first time since January. There have been 6 mentees and 6 mentors, all supported by Braithwaite and organised by Chris Bridgman, our development producer. So those relationships are ongoing and I hope have been productive. We've had 25 of these marvellous weekly calls with over 600 attendances. We had 1 in-person get-together at the Sunbeams Music Trust, and some of you I know were there. It was such a good day, and you know, Dr. Ife Akintunde's rendition of Amazing Grace is something that will also stay with me for a very long time, as will his talk about the need for organisations to have a really clear vision. That's something that I really took from that day. Tom has produced 5 podcasts since January, and I know there are more to come over the next few months. We've played a really useful part in the Helping Hands project in terms of communicating all the volunteer opportunities that are emerging from that. Helping Hands is a project that aims to break down barriers to volunteering, and our role as a network is to communicate those. Views of our website, use of our website has shot up in particular over the last 6 months. Been a sort of 70% increase in the number of users on the website, particularly on the opportunities page. So that's obviously proving very useful to people, and we do try to keep that up to date every single week. We've delivered training in fundraising, but also in emotional resilience and suicide awareness, actually. And there's more of that sort of thing to come over the next 6 months. We reckon there has been 5,200 hours of voluntary efforts put into the network over the last 18 months. And so it goes on. What's the upshot of all of that? The upshot is that the culture sector in Cumbria is better connected and ready to collaborate. And we see that every single week, people are put in touch with each other, and it's the start of many high quality, beautiful projects that often go on to be funded. So that's why we're here. That's what we do. In terms of what our future, we are now a not-for-profit company limited by guarantee, running ourselves, and that's happened in the last 6 months too. There's so much more to come in the next 6 months, but I don't want to talk about that now. That was meant as a sort of end of term styly roundup of the things that we've done, so I hope that was useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you for all the time and effort you put into being our chair and all the work you put into funding applications and all sorts of advocacy conversations you have as well. It's hugely appreciated. Just one thing, looking ahead, Amy's just put a note into chat there. The next online gathering of specific sectors that we're just trying to help network and pull together is the theatre and spoken word one, which is on the 26th of July. The last one, which was for visual artists, I think 23 people came to. It was a Zoom call that Alison Critchlow led, and it was very successful, I think. So if you fancy spreading the word about the theatre and spoken word one, or if that's pertinent to you too, then there's the contact. It's all free. Just need to make sure that we know that you're coming on the Eventbrite invitation. I think we're there. Thanks ever so much to Naomi. Great to hear your success story, Naomi, and all your fantastic plans to spend all that money. And to Amanda as well for a great sounding project that I shall certainly be watching closely. It just sounds great. So thank you to both of you. I've no idea what we'll be doing next week yet. Next week will be the last one. We'll have August off. So next week will be the last Friday call for a month, and then we'll pick up again in September. But there will be exciting stuff taking place next Friday. So do join us again. Lovely to see you all. And take care. Have a nice weekend. Pray for no rain in Manchester on Saturday. For my behalf, thank you. See you next Friday.